Hi, I'm Dan Lagani with Silver Solutions, the home-related services company for families with aging parents. On today's episode of AgeWise, we speak to one of my favorite people, Liz Vaccariello, the editor-in-chief of Real Simple. Liz is also a content director at the Meredith Corporation, one of the largest publishers in America, and her background is just so rich and varied. She's run brands like Prevention, Reader's Digest, Parents Magazine. We're going to talk to her about things both professional and personal. Liz Vaccariello, thanks for joining the show.
My pleasure.
Liz, I gave a little bit of a rundown of the places that you've had an impact on over the years. Tell us how you got started in the media business.
Well, I always wanted to be a writer, and so that's what I studied. And as these things go, you write at magazines, and then if you're also able to manage people and do your job well, you get promoted and you start to edit everything. And so I quickly became an editor in Cleveland, Ohio, actually. I'm from the Midwest, and then moved to New York and started my national magazine journey, if you will.
You know, I want to touch on Real Simple for a minute in greater length because you seem to do so many stories that are near and dear to what we do at Silver Solutions, where we help declutter homes and make them safer for older adults. Why is decluttering and reorganization so central to the DNA of Real Simple?
Boy, it's really, when I think about life stages, and I have, as I've worked at Reader's Digest and Parents Magazine, through each life stage, we assess our stuff. And sometimes the things around us are good for us emotionally, and sometimes the things around us are not. They are baggage, literally, and they literally weigh us down emotionally. There have been studies that show that. So whether it's as our children age and we're getting rid of the baby clothes and the baby toys, or it's we are downsizing ourselves and we are deciding what to give away, what to donate, what to keep, what becomes an heirloom, and what's the best way to store it. There is a lot to unpack there, to use an expression, both practically how to do it, as well as emotionally what it means. So there's an endless supply of need for guidance there.
You know, you mentioned something, though, that's so critical to it, even in the side of the business that we're on, emotional. Like, how do you help counsel people about the emotional process that comes along with parting with things that have just accumulated over the years to the point where there's simply too much of it? What's the advice that you give people?
Oh boy, I wish it were as simple as the holding it in your hand, does it spark joy? And if it doesn't, throw it away. We've all sort of heard that in the culture in the last couple of years. Sometimes people have a very difficult time deciding if the object has meaning or the memory has meaning. And sometimes there could be hundreds of objects, whether they're photographs, whether they're T-shirts, that all represent a time in your life or a passion. Say you're a runner, right? Do I keep every single running T-shirt? Or does giving them away mean I'm no longer a runner? No, there's a way to preserve, maybe pick your favorite, or a lot of people frame the one thing that represents the period of their life or the passion, or give it to somebody who can make use of it in the case of things like furniture or technology. So it's really about assessing what does the object or the category of objects really represent to you.
What a wonderful way to think about it. What's on your list? What'll be when you get to the point at some point in the future when you downsize? What's going to be one of the things that you keep from this era of the 2020s?
Oh boy. I kept two things from the pandemic. So I already have the objects. One is a napkin upon which we were keeping score in the early weeks with the nightly Uno game, my husband and my twin daughters and myself. And it just became this like magic markered, literally a napkin. And we put a pin in it in April. And so I'll keep that. And I'm going to keep the yellow lollipop I got when I got my first vaccine. And that's it. Like, I don't need to keep anything else.
Let's go back to some of the other places that you've worked at. As we look at those, what's interesting to me is they've exposed you to so many different groups of people over time. And I think about prevention and Reader's Digest, where health content was important there, but there were also slightly older audiences. What did you learn about communicating to older adults that may be different than what you do today?
Older adults, I think, have more of an intuitive understanding about the idea of emotion, the idea of what really matters to me, to my family, to the world, to this life. And it's not, I don't mean to be grim, and it's not about being on your deathbed and knowing what's important. It's really understanding that, the best use, just in the case of reading a magazine, the best use of an hour of my time is probably to read stories that have meaning and that are going to make me feel something by reading an issue of Reader's Digest, for example, than spending it on Facebook. And so the power of print, it's been very interesting to see who has remained loyal to print books, to print magazines, to newspapers. They tend to be 50 plus.
What do you think about in your own life professionally and personally about age? How do you approach the issue, and do you even pay attention to it?
Oh, there's so much to say about age. The first thing I will say has to do with the physical aspects of aging. Certainly, there are things that you have to attend to. The body changes, the aches and pains come, the blood sugar numbers rise, and the cholesterol. So there are things that are true to the number on the birth certificate, right? And so health and wellness is one part of aging that is one part of life that requires a lot more attention once you sort of cross that threshold of 50. I find up until then you sort of think, well, I'm never going to be that person, or I'm never going to break my hip, or I'm never going to have arthritis where I can't open a can, and then at 50, my husband and I are hobbling around the house because of our foot pain and this and that. And so it's like, oh boy, the body does get old. So you have to deal with it. You can't ignore it. But the other part of aging really has to do with the mental aspects of it and keeping the mind sharp, keeping the spirit engaged. And most people prefer to focus on that part of things. That's a lot more fun to think, now I can do whatever I want. Now I have the time, the kids are gone. I have the time to do the reading I want to do, to have the conversations with friends that I never had uninterrupted time to have. And so the joys of aging and the mindset, I think, of anybody 50 plus, it becomes less about how old are you, as in my mind as a content creator, and more what are your interests and how can I talk to you about them? And whether you're 50 or 70, that doesn't change.
I mentioned a second earlier about your home. The home that you're in right now, I'm guessing, is the home that you've raised your family in to this point. Will it be the place you stay as you get older? We talked about mobility changes. Is it suited for you and your husband as you both get older, or will you have to think about downsizing at some point?
So, such a great question. And it's the exact thing I'm thinking about at this very moment. So I'm thinking that very thing. I'm thinking I'm not going to need all these rooms in this house. We have 3 floors right now. Steve's office is on the 3rd floor. He can barely walk across the kitchen because of his plantar fasciitis. So how long is that 3rd floor going to be useful? But then also this emotional part of, I want this to be the home that the girls come back to during college, after college, like I did with my parents at my childhood home. But I don't want to pay these crazy taxes for this.
Sure.
And you look around and you think, do I redo the garage door? Because maybe I only have 4 more years. And do I really care if the garage door is subpar? There are so many decisions, big and small. I will not live here until the day I die. It's just too unwieldy. It's a 4-story, single family home with a yard that needs to be kept up and with carpets that need to be cleaned. And it would be a silly use of my time and money to stay here forever.
One last topic that I want to get onto, and that's your own parents. Clearly, they had an impact on making you who you are. And I want to share with you one thing that comes to mind that I remember so clearly about you. It may have been your first editor's letter at Reader's Digest back in 2011. And you really wrote it as an ode to your dad that had passed away that year. Talk to us about the impact that both your mom and dad have had on making who you are, you.
Yeah. Oh my God, you're going to make me cry. Yes. I think we all, at some point, some of us, it's in their 20s. And for me, it was really in my 40s where it clicks that everything they did, so much of what they did, so many of the choices that they made with their money, with their home, were for me. And I just sat there and was so ungrateful, so unaware. And so I think I'm doing the opposite. I think I'm telling my girls, by the way, we're still living here so that you can go to that school. You have to help vacuum because you can go. So that awareness is part of it. I'm very lucky because my mother is in her 80s and is completely self-sufficient. She had a knee replacement. I went to Cleveland and stayed with her for 3 days. And that was about the extent of the caretaking that I needed to do. She was like on her, very healthy. She's going to live to be 110. And I plan to live to be 120. Like that's just, we've got those genes. I'm also, and this is another factor that gets woven into as our parents age, I'm also the child, there's 2 children, that lives 8 hours away. And my sister lives by my mother. So if my mother needs to get up on a ladder to change something, she calls my sister. So we really haven't had to deal with any sort of, crisis that demanded 24/7. But do I think about the money? Do I think about any long-term care? When she refinanced her house, I wanted to know I wanted to be in there helping her with that decision because that was going to affect me someday. So that changing dynamic is very, very interesting. But I got my appreciation for decluttering, for storage, for being sort of Germanic, if you will, about my stuff from my mother. When my father passed away, within 2 months, she had sold the house they lived in, donated most of his clothes, bing, bang, boom, dump, like just time to move on. So I think there's something stoic. And when I say Germanic, she's German, and there's something about that. Well, let's just get the job done. So I get that from her. But I also, as a Gen Xer, I also have this, heart in me that also wants to have a little more emotion involved with all of those decisions. So I've created something of a situation for myself when it comes to that.
Well, Liz, thank you so much for sharing, both professionally and personally. I've known you for a while, and the last piece was something I would have never known if we weren't having this conversation today. Give us a teaser. What's great that you're working on, or one of your media brands are working on right now? That's a story we can look forward to in the coming months.
Oh, wow. Actually, it's Real Simple, in the August issue of Real Simple magazine, is a story on the emotions of decluttering, and it's decluttering regrets. And I'm actually going to tell a story about Reader's Digest in it. I don't know if your audience will appreciate this, but you remember Reader's Digest. We interviewed the presidential candidates every 4 years, right? So there was a story where I, as editor, I interviewed Barack Obama for his second term, so in the Oval Office, and then Mitt Romney, right? And we ran that interview. And as I was decluttering at the early part of the pandemic, I threw away all my Reader's Digests. I thought anything I need will be online. I had made copies of my editor's letter book. And for this story in Real Simple about decluttering regrets, I needed to find a picture of that ran in Reader's Digest in that issue. And I had thrown it away. And so it was a text chain with several former Reader's Digest colleagues trying to see if anybody had that issue of Reader's Digest. And we wound up spending 2 or 3 days sort of chatting with each other, the 5 of us, and one of them got their hands on a PDF of this page. And my friend said, at the end of it, she said, I think the lesson here is that you don't need to save the stuff, but you need to save the friends who have access to some of the stuff. And I think that will be my editor's letter in that issue of Real Simple about decluttering regrets.
Well, that's a great story. I look forward to seeing it and printed online in August. Liz Vaccariello, editor-in-chief of Real Simple, and so many other brands at the Meredith Corporation that we didn't even get a chance to cover. Thanks so much for joining us today at AgeWise and making us all a little smarter about the things we need to understand as we and our loved ones get older. If you like this episode of AgeWise, you can find more of them at silversolutions.com. Just go to the website and click on the video tab and see all of our past episodes. For all of us here at Silver Solutions who work hard every day to keep your parents safe and happy, I'm Dan Lagani. Stay safe and be wise.